Oh, that was my mistake. What I'll do is I'm going to look it up right now on my phone and give it to you. I should have tapped where it's not necessary, but hold on 1 second. I'll give it to you right now. One second. I'm just going to look it up. Okay, the meeting ID is 821 5246 3399. Right, and the fact that it says 99, I know that's a good omen.
There we go.
Okay. 1 second. It'll take a minute, a few seconds to come up on my end to let you into the meeting. So it should happen in a couple of seconds. You know, it's amazing. We're so advanced with these things, but at the end of the day, there are the glitches. So there it is. You should come on right now, and then I'll turn the phone off. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. And do you have your camera on? Do you have the video part on? There you go. Hold on. There you are.
Okay.
You can see me okay?
Yeah, good.
You look terrific. You look 27. That's what you look. You look absolutely spectacular.
Let's keep it that way.
Okay.
Where are you?
I'm doing great. You know, Barbara, we spoke about this many years ago. I started it about 7 years ago. And, just going into senior communities and rehabilitation places and hospice places, just sharing personal anecdotes about conversations I had with Jackie Mason and Frank Sinatra, or stories that Tommy Dreesen gave me about Dean Martin, and playing video clips. And it took on a life of its own. And I got involved with chains. You have these senior communities. Some of them are independent living, where they're just hotel style living for folks who are willing to pay a high rent. And I'm broadcasting this now over Zoom, which I charge them a fee for. And I'm in 6 states. I'm in Florida, Colorado, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And it just keeps getting bigger. And I'm finding I'm also with places like community centers, and men's clubs are having me come down. And last week, a hotel in Stamford, Connecticut had me do a presentation to their audience. And I'm finding that younger people are saying, you know something, there's more to Sinatra than New York, New York, and we like him. And they never heard of Alan King, but they see him for 5 minutes, and Buddy Hackett, and they say, these guys are really funny. And I'm getting an audience in their 20s and 30s. And the girls say, how can you not say Dean Martin is the coolest guy in the world? And it's unbelievable. So it's just gotten so big. And there's one community in Chicago. They call it the VI. And they have 9 of these across the country. You got to be able to put $1 million into the kitty in order to rent an apartment that's about $15,000 a month. And if you take your money out, you automatically lose $200,000 of it. So I've become a hit there. These are high functioning people in their 50s and 60s. They want more Carol Channing. They want more Jackie Mason. And, I've become kind of like the right guy, because I knew these guys, at least in their senior years. And I always share nice stories. And that kind of makes the video clip a little more interesting to them. And they said, we also want celebrity guests. So I had Peter Yarrow come on for an interview. Marlo Thomas came on for an interview. They say, El, we love what you're doing. You're creating smiles and improving lives. So That's the reason for this. And I'm so happy to see you and that you look so beautiful and that you're doing well.
Thank you. Well, what you're doing is just a terrific gesture, toward people's well-being. And I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful for them and it's wonderful for you. You've found your niche.
You know, Barbara, years ago, when I originally told you I was starting to do this, and I told you that one of the places rebooked me, you said something that gave me a lot of confidence. You said, El, the fact that they're rebooking you and they're paying you, that means you're a hit and you're one of us. And that gave me a lot of confidence. And I wanna thank you for saying it. It was so nice.
Well, I don't remember it, but
You
I'm
did.
glad I said it if it made you happy. That's good.
Barbara, what's happening with you now? I just want what I do is I take these interviews and, I cut them down to like a 5 or 6 or 7 minutes out of a 15 or 20-minute interview. So I just want you to tell the people in the audience who love you as Agent 99 a little bit about the background, things you shared with me. I think you grew up in Pennsylvania and you came here as a young lady who knew she was going to make it. And I think you started as a model and then a dancer at the Coper. And if you could pick it up from there, it's your story. I know the audience would love it.
Can I mention my book?
Please, that's the whole idea because
Yeah.
they go on Amazon and your website and they buy your book. So that's the whole idea.
Yeah. Okay, but you'll be interviewing me, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it. Well, this is being recorded right now.
Oh.
We're already being recorded, and then I'll take about 5 minutes of it to actually air. But the recording is happening right now.
Okay, so what is the question?
Well, the question is really your background. I remember you telling me you from the beginning, you came here from, I think, Pennsylvania, and you said, El, I believe you started one of your early jobs was a dancer at the Copacabana, and then you went on for modeling. I think it was top brass. And you told me something about George C. Scott's wife connecting with you, and that led to Agent 99.
Right. Okay, I kind of cover this in my book because the book is called Getting Smarter,
Right.
so that I learned something along the way, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it is part memoir of how I began, and what influenced me in childhood and so forth. But the central part of the book, which maybe we can mention later, is my very exciting, adventurous, zany marriage to a sociopath. And believe it or not, sociopaths, they're not going around stabbing people. They can be very charming and kind of wonderful company. The problem being they're a little grandiose and they get themselves in trouble, and finally you don't want to go down with the ship. But nevertheless, yes, I was born in Pittsburgh when it was, to me, in retrospect, it seems very poetic because at that time when I was a little kid, the steel mills were still, that was the major industry. It was a steel town. And at night, the skies would just blush red and the soot fell as though it were snow falling on everything. Brick was black, it wasn't red. You could, when we would be in my dad's car driving through the hills, you could see these funnel-shaped cars dumping out the slag, which was like lava, like burning lava, like bright red lava just flowing down the hills. And Pittsburgh was so hilly itself. So that whole terrain, which I've never encountered again, in retrospect seems very romantic to me. I always wanted to be on stage ever since I saw the circus and I saw the flying trapeze artists. And even though I have acrophobia and I was sitting in the bleachers and I couldn't look down, I was so afraid, but watching the aerialists in their sparkling outfits, made me decide I was going to be in that spotlight, you know, being flying through the air. And I never fulfilled that dream for sure. But I went to school at Carnegie, what's now Carnegie Mellon Drama School, and then came to New York and naively thought, well, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to make it. I never, I mean, that's why it's so important for kids to be naive, because they wouldn't do anything if they really knew what could happen or what might not happen. I just was completely confident, and then it didn't happen, and I was here several years and I was getting nowhere. And then I began modeling and working. I was under contract to Revlon, doing top brass commercials, you know, rolling around on an endangered species, which you couldn't do
We
today.
all remember that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a very cool thing to do today, because you don't want those tiger skins to be a part of, yeah, it's not good.
When you were rolling on the rug, nobody was looking at the tiger skin. So don't worry about that.
Well, hopefully I'll be forgiven for that. And but yes, George Scott, in a funny way, no, in a very real way, George Scott was responsible for my career, because I gave up acting. And I thought, I've got to make money. I've got to have a, you know, a reasonably respectful, you know, life where I'm treated with respect. And
Now, Barbara, you were making money at the Copacabana, am I correct?
I right away I got a job at the Copacabana dancing in the chorus. There were 6 of us, and Elliott, that was the most exciting job of my whole life. I mean, nothing compared, not being on a hit television series, nothing compared. Well, maybe working with Dean Martin compared with it, but for the absolute thrill of dancing, that's literally when you're 22 years old, you know, and doing high kicks in these glittery costumes. And Jimmy Durante was appeared there, and he had us doing backup for him in little short tuxedo things with the hat. And I don't know how many people remember Jimmy Durante, but Umbriago, and we were, and I had grown up hearing him sing that song and to be dancing with him doing it. And he gave us a tip at the end, all of the dancers, a tip of $50, which I never expected. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So then from then I became a showgirl in a remake of the Ziegfeld Follies, and where I walked to music and these incredible, skimpy, but by today's standard, not at all skimpy costumes, with trailing sequins behind me and wearing headdresses. One was the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it had sparkling lights. And one night we had to walk down this long staircase with very short runners on the steps. And it was quite perilous because we were in spike heels, and then we had these huge headdresses that weighed a lot. And one night I walked down. I was always relieved to get at the bottom, but then somebody had left a piece of wood or something on the stage, and I tripped on it. And I started to fall. I was at the front of the stage. I started to fall into the orchestra pit. And the Leaning of Tower of Pisa, I caught my balance before I stepped on the head of a bald violinist. There was a little piece of stage left, but the Leaning Tower did not, it fell forward, and the whole audience, and it was all sparkling and everything, and the whole audience is going, oh, you know, like when you see fireworks. But I caught it, and I felt so powerful and so competent. And then I noticed that the audience was laughing and the dancers and singers were laughing. And I suddenly realized I had padded that headdress with 2 falsies to their foam rubber and to make it more comfortable for myself. The headdress fell off, but the falsies did not. So I stood there very proudly displaying the 2 breasts on my head. And then when I realized, I tried to salvage a little bit of dignity, and I walked off into the wings, but my train caught on the footlights, and I dragged the footlights off after me. So that was my big deal.
Barbara,
That,
they call that initiation by fire. If you survive that, you become a general right away, and that's what happened.
yeah, really. So, but then there, I did this or that job, but it wasn't making money for me. I won the $64,000 question during that time when I was a showgirl.
Now,
And
Barbara, I'm just going to jump in. You mentioned that, and that's an interesting period of your life. That was a show that had a tremendous controversy, and you were at the center of that. Can you tell us a little bit of that about it?
yeah, um, our show, the $64,000 question, nobody gave us answers. I mean, so that was 21 was the show that was really controversial. But everybody was suspected at that time. There was a big brouhaha and a big, um, uh, everybody was called into the assistant district attorney's office. I was scared out of my wits, because no, I wasn't given answers. But the question, I had studied for 3 months. They gave me that. I said I have to study for 3 months. I had picked Shakespeare, and so I learned all this trivia about Shakespeare. I mean, nothing that matters, not the real import of Shakespeare, just dumb trivia, like what years the plays were done or whatever. And and then they tested me, and I did not think the questions were all that challenging, but I was happy to be winning. Um, they were things I actually did know, and so that's the way that went. I mean, our show was exonerated as it should have been. And actually, there was no law broken for any show. I mean, the one who really profited the most was the guy who was running for district attorney, because his name was in the headlines every day, Meantime, the rest of us would think, oh my God, did we do something wrong? But
Barbara,
anyway, the money, as is the case with that, I met at that time this glamorous Frenchman, and who had this incredible life during the war in Europe, and he was just thrillingly handsome, and I gave him the money to set up a trust fund. And so then part of the book is, I mean, and also part of getting smarter, never do that. And so
Barbara, what happened to the money?
I didn't find out for 2 years. I thought it was in a trust fund. But then, I mean, that's part of the book, what you find out, what happened to the money, but it was gone.
Oh.
And in a not a very good way. And so that was part of my learning curve. Happily, that was the least of my worries, in life in general.
Now, this guy seemed to be a fellow who had more stories than Ernest Hemingway. Were you able to separate the fact from the fiction?
Not for a long time, because I'd never been lied to in my life. I don't think I was ever lied to. And you don't expect it, People who are sociopathic can be very charming, but probably there's a brain anomaly is part of it, that the conscience part of the brain is not fully developed. And so consequently, they don't feel conscience the way the rest of us do. So they're disabled in that way. But the rest of us who are not like that can't imagine that. We can't imagine that, you know, you're someone you love and who loves you, and he did love me, but would do what they are capable of doing. And I came out fine in the end. I mean, and with a greater understanding of human nature, and really gratitude to him for the exciting life that we led, even though it was a fantasy, you know, which is a whole philosophical issue. I mean, if you're experiencing it, does that count? I mean, even if it's not true, I think I'll write an essay about that sometime.
Barbara, you know, I love your disposition. You always seem to find the concept of it's all for the best, and you seem to do that with everything. I remember we were chatting a little bit about your relationship with Don Adams during Get Smart, and your relationship with Don Adams many years after Get Smart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in the book too. I tell the stories about the show. Don and I, Agent 99 and Maxwell Smart, had instant chemistry. You know how when you meet somebody, you know right away that your kinship, there's something, you just bond immediately. Our characters bonded the first day. And nobody knew that would happen because we never met until we were standing on our marks, ready to do the first scene. I never met him. I never auditioned for the role. They just gave it to me. And so that happened just fortuitously. And that's something that there's no way to know that until you see it on film. And everybody was very relieved. But Don and I did not natively have a response to each other. We came from entirely different backgrounds. He was very involved with the show because he was the star of it, obviously, and he was very preoccupied with the show. And I would say in 5 years, I don't think we had 5 conversations. You know, we were very respectful and very friendly, and even, you know, sort of sweetly teasing, you know, the way actors do. But there was no real bond between us. And then when the show was canceled, we didn't talk to each other. Nobody picked up the phone and said, gee, this is over, or that was great, or anything. 19 years went by, and we did a remake for a movie for ABC called Get Smart Again or something. I can't remember. And Don and I had not seen each other in all those years. The minute we saw each other, it was as if we were long lost relatives. And I say in the book, it's as if there were seeds of friendship planted during those 5 years that neither of us had time to recognize or put, you know, any effort into, but that they sprouted over the years unbeknown to us. And when we saw each other, it had blossomed into a friendship that was so dear and that lasted for the rest of his life.
You know, I love that story because of the growth of Don Adams. It seemed like he was a different Don Adams when you had met him the second time around, and I think that's something very, very nice.
Yeah, he was. It's not that he was, you know, a better Don Adams or worse or anything. It was that he was no longer preoccupied with the show. You know, he was now just living his life so that he could concentrate. You know, it's where we put our attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you put your attention on one thing, you can't attend to another. So when that's removed, then something else comes into view that was right in front of you all the time.
Barbara, I don't think it affected you becoming a TV star. You seem to look at it the right way. Show business is another business. And you became a television star, I guess, for about 5 years. And I think part of those 5 years, you may have run at #1 in the ratings.
Yeah.
That's pretty big, especially the audience the networks used to have. And then when the TV show is over, hey, Barbara Feldon goes on with her life. This is not a big deal. Very impressive.
Oh, well, that's nice of you to say, but it's logical. You know, I had a lot of therapy along the way. And so I had prepared myself. I was realistic about what the business is and what the business is, especially for women. As they get older, I knew that the career was going to be a short one. I mean, I did continue on for a few years doing television movies and a couple of features. Um, but by the time I was 50, it was over. I mean, over. But I did not expect it to last longer than that. So yes, I looked at it from, from the point of a business person. From then I could still perform like in little theater, or I did a lot of poetry readings, which I loved doing, probably more than acting in general. And I did a musical off Broadway and just this and that. But I, I, I mean, if I had anything to lament, I mean, I had nothing to lament. I was very, very fortunate, and very few actors were as fortunate as I was. Um, and thank goodness I prepared myself for it, and saved money. I was not extravagant. And but of course, it is the issue of how women are seen, and how they are seen as sexual objects, and how quickly that fades over time, in a way that it doesn't for men. And even though it is better now than it was, it hasn't gone away. It's pretty much the same thing. So
Well,
that
Barbara, you had come at the time of the beginning of what you would call the women's movement or the previous feminine agenda, 1965. And I always got the impression when I watched Get Smart that you really were the brainy beauty. You came up with the solutions and then you made Max think it was his idea. So you created something that I guess was the very beginning of what women's roles are today.
I wish I could take credit for 99, but I can't, because I didn't write her.
Mm.
I didn't conceive her. And at the time when I first began playing her, she was more of a feminist than I was. She was bold, she was strong, she had a sense of who she was. She knew how to handle him, and yet she had a big heart. She had a warmth. I I I was not nearly as evolved as Agent 99. And I mean, she was doing a huge job, and I would never conceive myself, nor do I think there were probably actual women, very many of them, at the CIA doing undercover work. I'm sure there were some, but I think it was mostly a man's game, you know? And there she was, right in the center of a man's game and acing it. And that was Mel Brooks and Buck Henry. And they, just as artists always anticipate what's in the air but isn't yet evident to everyone, they anticipated feminism. And by the end of the show, I caught up to Agent 99 in my thinking. But I feel very fortunate that I was cast in a role that showed a woman in such a favorable light.
Barbara, you mentioned such an iconic name in television and film and comedy. How involved was Mel Brooks in Get Smart?
How involved?
Yes.
Well, he created it with that's huge.
Okay.
He created it with Buck Henry. I believe he wrote 3 episodes over the period of the show. I'm not sure. I mean, he could verify that or not. He directed 1 or 2. but mainly, you know, Mel was a superstar and he went on to other things. And Buck Henry eventually, after 2 years staying with the show, did as well. But I was daily in touch with Buck Henry because he was writing away just, you know, next to the sound studio. Um, but we very rarely saw Mel. So his involvement in a hands-on way was not as much as Leonard Stern. Dan Melnick's idea was the show, that they were talent associates and they produced the show. So those were the people that I actually hands-on worked with, not Mel at that time. Later, I knew him socially, and he's a darling. You know, I'm very, very fond of him. But his actual participation in my life in the show was not very, very large.
Barbara, you and I had a friend who is no longer with us, and we both miss him. One night I get a call from Jackie Mason, and he says, "El, I want you to meet me in a coffee shop in a Taft Hotel. There's a lovely friend I'd like to introduce you to, and his name is Bill Dana." And I went
Uh,
down. I
yeah.
went down and I met Billy, and instant friends. And it worked out. I got him a job with Pat Cooper and Robert Klein at Kravis Center in West Palm Beach, and they had about
Oh,
2,000 people there that night. But Billy shared some stories with me. First of all, he did do one episode of Get Smart. I think it was Ice Station Siegfried or
right.
something. And I had another man who I haven't spoken to in a while named Bernie Copel. And he told me, Sadell, I was also on that show because I was Siegfried. I was the guy down there. And Billy told me that he was the head writer for the original Tonight Show with Steve Allen, and he had a
Mm,
great career. But he said, El, when he got a TV show of his own, didn't last, called The Bill Dana Show,
yeah, I
short, few
remember that.
episodes. And he said Don Adams, who was one of his closest friends, he wrote a character as the hotel detective Byron Glick.
Yeah,
And he said, Would you believe in those lines? He said that was part of that character
yeah.
who became Get Smart. And then one time he did do a show where he was on with you, Ice Station Siegfried.
Yeah, I remember that. And Don was not in that episode. It was just Bill and me.
Right.
And I saw him a few years ago, a few times. He's just a dear person. Um, yeah.
Well, just so you know, he shared something very sweet with me. I think you may enjoy it. We all remember him as Jose Jimenez, that famous character, that Latino doorman who decided to become a career change and become an astronaut. And he said, El, around 1960, that astronaut character became very popular. Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show. And he said Frank Sinatra had called him to be part of the special ball to raise money for the inauguration of John Kennedy in January of
Mm,
1960. So he said, El, I'm coming down there in my astronaut uniform because I'm going to go out as Jose the astronaut.
yeah.
And he said, before the show, all the performers line up, and President Kennedy goes down the line backstage, shaking everybody's hand, taking a photograph. He said, except when he got to me, he knows I'm Jose, I'm an astronaut. So President Kennedy fired off a salute, and I got a picture of that as the famous astronaut. But what a sweet guy. But Barbara, you worked with these big guys. How was it to work with Dean Martin on his variety show?
I even talk about that in the book because I mean, I
I
skirted.
could have wrote this book.
Yeah, yeah, you could. Um, because I don't deal. The book is not about my career, you know, um, but that was just the most fun I ever had in my life. I mean, anyway, except dancing at the Copacabana. um, Dean didn't rehearse. I mean, you've probably heard this.
Yes, yes.
Dean didn't rehearse. And so what your job was, if you were the one doing the scene with him, doing the sketch with him. Your job was to get the maximum reaction out of him. And of course, me being a woman, the sketches were all geared that way, and kind of like teasingly, double entendre. And so I would rehearse on my own. I would learn the sketch. And then when we were all ready, the audience was there, the cameras are set, we're all ready to go. I'm on my marks. And then Greg Garrison, who was this incredible producer, director,
Yes.
would yell, "Bring out the kid." And out would saunter Dean, and he would sit on a stool or something. And he would look at the teleprompter, and then it was the actor, me in this case, is absolutely empowered, totally empowered to do anything I want to do with him. And it's like a kid with a big dog, like a big warm tolerant, collie or something. And he was so responsive and so funny. And there's a picture in the book of me with him, and the joy just radiates out of the picture, the spontaneity, so that was, I did several Dean Martin shows, and that was great. And I also,
Barbara, you really lived through what I think was the greatest era for variety artists, people like Dean Martin, the singers, the comedians, the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, the Ed Sullivan Show. And I don't, there's a golden age to everything, the Renaissance and all those things. And I don't really think there's going to be another time where you had so many fabulous performers all out there at the same time, Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Judy Garland, the whole bit. And concerning television, you are without a doubt part of that. I think you had mentioned that you went to Australia not long ago and they recognized you out there as Agent 99 from the reruns as Get Smart. Is that right? Did I get that correct?
Yeah, in Australia, they still every day they rerun Get Smart.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a surprise to get there and see the enthusiasm. Like, oh, really? And that was kind of nice. You mentioned Bernie Capel.
Yes.
Bernie is a dear friend of mine, and he is so gifted, and his he as a character actor. Mm-hmm. And that opportunity for him to play Siegfried showed what he could do, his imagination, his just gift, and yeah, he's great. And he still acts.
When I hadn't spoken to Bernie in many, many years, probably 7 or 8 years, but I do remember him telling me, he said, "Al, you got to realize," he said, "at the time of Get Smart, I was on two shows. I was on Get Smart and Marlo Thomas's show, That Girl. And on Get Smart, I was playing a Nazi. And on Marlo Thomas's show, That Girl, I was playing a nice Jewish kid who was friendly with her boyfriend." I said, "Bernie, thank God you didn't mix those roles up. It would have been a disaster." And he said after that, he got the Love Boat. Have you been in touch with Bernie recently? Is he okay?
With him all the time. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So terrific. Now, Barbara, this wonderful book, Getting Smarter, how would people purchase it? Amazon, your website, Barnes and Noble?
Yeah, you can get the paperback on Amazon. Just go to Amazon, a bookstore, or you can go to barbarafeldon.com and you can choose between the paperback and the hardcover just by clicking a button. You can get it. And also you can get Living Alone and Loving It, which is the other book I read, that I wrote about its essays on living alone and how I learned to love it.
Well, I'm going to get it. I'll tell you that right now. I'm going to go for the hardcover, and then I'm going to find a way to get you to autograph it because we
Oh,
haven't had lunch in,
absolutely.
in a decade. But I'm excited about it because you are part of history and you are part of a show that is still out there, like I Love Lucy and those other shows. It's still a hit show. Amazing. And your life reflects, I think, the entertainment business, the television business in general. And I think younger people who want to become an actress or an actor would be a good idea to read your book and what you went through because the dynamics of the business, I don't know if it's changed that much. And I think they could actually learn a lot from your life and your experiences.
One of the things I do there's a section, a Get Smart section. And one of the things I do is take the reader with me, starting from when the alarm clock goes off in the morning and going to the studio and what it's like a day on the set of doing a series. And it's not what they might think. And so it's kind of amusing, but I just thought it would be fun to write what it's actually like on a daily basis to do, to
That's
be
a great
acting.
idea. You know, Barbara, I don't know. I have a friend, I think you may know her. Do you know Lainey Kazan? You probably do.
Yes, I do.
And Lainey, I spoke to, I guess about a year ago, and she told me, she says, Elle, what I'm proudest of now, she is an adjunct professor at UCLA, means she teaches on occasion. And she says she has some good young students teaching them her format of acting her way through a song. And some of them have actually made it to Broadway. And who knows, maybe sometime in the future, you could occasionally stop by a Columbia University or something and teach those young kids your experience on how, hey, to be as successful as Barbara Feldon.
Well, you know, the truth is you can do everything right. And if you don't have luck, if you're not in the right time at the right place, I started to tell you the story about George C. Scott. I was just doing a walk on in his series, East Side, West Side. And I didn't even want to do it because I was under contract to Revlon. I was making very comfortable money. And I thought I'd given up acting. And my agent insisted I go out to Queens where they were shooting it and just do this one line thing. And I did. And that day, Colleen Dewhurst, the great actress who was married to George and had worked with me in Summer Stock, saw me there and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm just doing this one line in a disco scene." She said, "Come on into George's dressing room." And George said, "Hey, want to play my girlfriend next week?" And I did want to. And the producers of that show produced Get Smart. And that's how they got introduced to me.
Barbara, you're amazing. I know this book is going to be as big a hit as all the other things you've been involved in. And I want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to do an interview for me and my audience. And it is so thrilling to see you again. You are delightful. You're a pleasure to talk with. You always have a positive and optimistic outlook on everything, and your smile is contagious. So all of a
Oh.
sudden, I feel great. I was tired before, and now I feel terrific. But I want to thank you very, very much, and I'm going to send you a copy of the recording so you have it as well. Thanks
Okay, and
again.
I want to thank you so much, Elliott, for your thoughtful questions and your enthusiasm, not only for in this interview, but your enthusiasm in life for show business and I mean, I've known you for years, many years now, I think, right?
Correct.
And that has never faded. And I think it's just lovely that you're doing what you're doing, and it's a service both to the theatrical community and to the people.
You are terrific, and we are going to talk again very, very soon. Barbara, thank you for your time and tremendous luck with your new book.
Thank you so much.